Greetings, everyone. I hope you are fine. I hope you are doing well. In this video, I just want to talk about the K word that is famous and popular around South Africa. If I'm not mistaken, we have different kinds of K words around South Africa, but there's this specific K word that I want to talk about in this video, and I just want to say this K word should not define anyone. This K word should not define an African child, should not define anyone in general. So this is what I want to talk about. I just want to give you a background. Why am I talking about this K word? It's because I was on social media and I saw this post and it was just a bit interesting. Then I clicked on that post, and under that post, I saw a comment. There's this individual who had left some facts under that post, and many people had decided to comment under his or her comment. And to be honest, he had left some facts, or he or she had left some facts. But here is the thing. Many people were like disagreeing with that particular individual. And some of them were now calling him or her kwere kwere. And I was just a bit shocked because I know that sometimes when people don't have facts, don't have anything to say to defend themselves, in most cases, they end up using a K word, or they end up using some words to belittle you or to undermine you. So this is what happened in that post. So I was just a bit embarrassed, surprised, or shocked at the same time that such things are still like existing in 2024. I was very much disappointed and embarrassed at the same time. So that is why I want to talk about this K word, which is kwere kwere, that I don't believe that there are people who still call others kwere kwere just because you cannot understand them, or maybe because you cannot relate with them. But every time I see such things, I have this tendency of trying by all means to dig deep, because I want to find the root of the problem. I want to find the source of the problem, because I don't want to celebrate things too quickly. I'm not that kind of a person. So whenever people celebrate, I try by all means to find the reason why they are celebrating and what is the source, or what is the root. Even when it comes to problems, even when it comes to challenges and difficulties, I'm that kind of a person that I try by all means to find the root of the problem, to find the source of the problem. So some people might disagree with me when it comes to this one, but I've discovered that many people have this tendency of undermining others because there's this problem of low self-esteem. Why? It's because we are living in the world whereby other people think they are superior than others, and others think they are inferior. But even those who think they are inferior, they still have this thing that feeling of thinking that they are better than others. In other words, even though they are inferior to others, but they still believe that they are superior to others as well. So we are living in that world whereby people are like fighting for titles, fighting for positions, who is better. When someone bullies you, they bully you because They feel like they can take advantage. They feel like you are weak. You cannot defend yourself. In other words, you cannot do anything. They can take advantage. Why I say this is because the reason why many people are calling others kwere kwere, at some point they might come up with various reasons to defend this word kwere kwere, to say it's because maybe we don't understand them. This is where it has originated. But here is the thing. If someone speaks Portuguese, or French or Dutch, and you don't understand that person, you don't call that person kwere kwere. If that person speaks English, if that person speaks maybe Arab, and you don't understand that person, you don't understand their language, you don't call them kwere kwere. But when your brother speaks Shona, when your brother speaks another language, you think you can do as you please. You can say whatever you want. You start calling them kwere kwere. So some people might try to justify it, but I don't see any justification here. I don't think there's any justification that can work when it comes to this, because I believe that there's a problem. There's a problem of low self-esteem. You know why you cannot call other people kwere kwere even if you don't understand them? It's because you feel like those people are superior to you. And if someone is superior to you, you cannot take advantage of them. That is why I said it's as a result of low self-esteem. In other words, if you have a problem of low self-esteem, you want to take advantage of people whom you think you are superior to them. But if you think there's someone who is superior than you, you respect that person and you don't want to take advantage of that particular person, or you don't want to take advantage of that particular individual. But now we have to go deep, because we cannot just leave it like that. Because if someone speaks Arab, speaks French, and you don't understand them, you don't call them kwere kwere. They come from Europe, you don't call them kwere kwere. But your fellow brother here in Africa, your fellow brother, you don't understand their language, the language they speak, you start calling them kwere kwere. What's wrong is more psychological than you can think. And when I go deep, I have to mention a man by the name of King Leopold II. And every time I talk about King Leopold, many people have this tendency of criticizing me, thinking that maybe I'm giving these guys unnecessary credit. But here is the thing. When we go to the Berlin Conference, we have to understand that this is where things started. And those guys had a plan to destroy Africa, or had a plan against Africa. And I believe that their plan worked very well, because their strategy was so powerful that even to this point, it's still working. The strategy is still working, whereby you hear people calling one another kwere kwere. You hear people undermining one another. But at the same time, why I say these guys, their strategy worked very well. They used this strategy against Africans to divide Africans, but they made Africans to love them. They made Africans to love the very same oppressor. This is what they did. That is why I'm like, their strategy was very unique and strategic. And I still believe that if Africans can use the very same strategy to build themselves, to empower themselves, I'm telling you the truth, Africa can go far. Right now, as we speak, Africa is stuck because of all these things, tribalism and etc. If you listen to one of the songs by Culture, there's a song where Joseph Hill said, tribal war won't help us. If I'm not mistaken, or if I remember well, tribal war doesn't benefit us. This is what Joseph Hill, a Jamaican, said to all of us, educating all of us through their music. And I still believe that people should wake up and understand that there's no way we can move forward as long as we are stuck to belittling one another, undermining our languages, undermining everything about us, undermining our culture, undermining our roots, and all those things. We are not going anywhere. But this is what they did at Berlin Conference. They said, okay, we can divide them. We have to divide them. But at the same time, we have to make them to trust us, to love us. That is why right now as we speak, if someone speaks Spanish, French, and other languages, European languages, you don't understand what they are saying, you won't call them kwere kwere. But when your brother speaks Shona, speaks a Venda, then you start calling that particular person kwere kwere. Then you ask yourself, what's going on? That is why we have to go back to the Berlin Conference. Say, okay, these guys had a strategy. But now some people might say, there's no need for us to blame those people. Yes, there's no need for us now maybe to blame those people right now as we speak. But it's part of history. So what we can do is to use the very same strategy for our own benefit. For our own benefit. Yes, right now as we speak, we are living in countries here in Africa. There's Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, South Africa, and many other countries all over South Africa, all over Africa, excuse me. I understand that. But we have to go back to the Berlin Conference and understand that these people came here and divided. The reason deep down in my heart I don't like align with all these things is because when I go back, I always find out that it's as a result of these people trying by all means to divide us. That is why I embrace Africa more than anything, more than a region, more than a sub-region, more than, like, for an example, Africa. But I always say we are living in the times of politics forced into us. There's absolutely nothing we can do. That is why we have to respect some of those things, because it's as a result of politics. If I go to Ghana, Nigeria, I have to respect their laws. I cannot just come there and say I'm an African. So there's a serious documents that are required. I get that, but deep down in my heart, I cannot allow the system to dictate me, so that at the end of the day, I end up calling my brother a kwere kwere, or undermining my brother, belittling my brother because of the system. Why? Because I have a different understanding. I understand the root of the system. So that is why I don't want to celebrate something that I don't understand, or I don't want to celebrate something that was invented to divide us. Let me just make an example so that maybe you can understand what am I talking about. Let's say maybe you and your siblings, you always fight against one another. You always criticize one another. But one day, all of a sudden, you start discovering that is as a result of an outsider. The reason you're fighting is because of an individual who is out there. That individual played the game so that you can fight against one another. After that discovery, I'm telling you, your mindset will change altogether. Your mindset will change altogether. You will start ignoring your siblings, even if they are mad at you. You'll start to ignore them. Why? Because now you understand the root of the problem. So that is why when we go back to the Berlin Conference, it's not because we are trying to shift a blame, but we are trying to find a solution to say, if someone is from Europe, they speak German, they speak French, you don't call them kwere kwere, but your brother, you think it's easy to call your brother kwere kwere kwere. I don't think that's a good thing. As I've said, that we are living in the politics. These political systems were forced into us. But when I use my own personal logic, I understand very well that there's absolutely nothing that I can embrace, especially if that particular thing was started because the purpose is to divide us. Then I cannot celebrate that particular thing. That's my position. Please bear in mind, in this video, I'm not talking about jobs. I'm not talking about all these things. I'm not talking about borders. I'm not talking about all these things, because even these borders were man-made as a result of the Berlin Conference. Yes, I understand that in the ancient times here in Africa, there were kingdoms and etc. But those kingdoms were not like what we see right now, whereby people are undermining one another or belittling one another and all those things. So we got to be very careful because if we allow to be used so that we can fight against one another, then that's a problem. That's a problem. That is why I always talk about loving yourself, because I believe that loving yourself is very important. Because if you love yourself, if you don't want to be undermined, then it means you should not undermine others. That is why they say you have to love your neighbor as you love yourself. So this is what I wanted to talk about in this video. And I'm not promoting people to break the laws, not to be documented, to cross the borders, maybe illegally. Yes, I understand that I have this mindset, but now we are living in those politics, and I believe that the politicians themselves, if they call themselves Pan-Africanists, they have to come together and say, you know what, we have to solve the problems of Africa. What about, for an example, making sure that each and every city in Africa is at the level of Johannesburg, is at the level of Cape Town, so that maybe South Africa is not pressured? Because people, whenever people think about the open border policy, they think that maybe people will come here in South Africa and take their jobs. This is not the South African thing only. When we talk about African unity, there are people in Kenya, there are people in different countries here in Africa who talk about African unity. So in order for Africa to be united as one, you need those people to work together to say, you know what, we have to bring balance across Africa. Because if you look at Europe, Europe is balanced. Europe is balanced. So same as Africa, excuse me, as Africa has to be balanced. In other words, if, for an example, we have like 25 cities across Africa that are at a level of Johannesburg, then it means South Africa will not be under pressure. So in order for this thing of open border policy to function very well, all those things should be dealt with. But right now, we have to go through all these difficult processes. Why? Because those people, this is what they did. That is why right now we have to, in other words, to destroy people it's easy, but to unite them, it's something which is very difficult. To collapse something, it's easy. In other words, it takes a day to collapse a house, but to build it, it takes some time. So I'm not saying people should do as they please. We all respect the laws. We all respect our leaders, but we should not take advantage of other people. So if we disagree with certain things, we have to disagree legally and with respect, to say, okay, this job is reserved for South Africans only, and etc. and etc. It's fine, because even when you go to other countries, it's something like that. They will say, okay, we prioritize our people here until maybe this thing works, But for me as an individual, I'm like, we cannot, like, for an example, insult one another or curse one another, belittling one another, undermining one another, just because maybe we want to please certain people. I don't think that's a good idea. So if you are an African, in other words, you have to love your brothers and sisters. So forget about this thing of like, I'm superior. Don't even think about superiority. Don't even think like you are better, because if you think you are better than somebody else, then you are acting like a bully. Because someone who is a bully, they always think like they are better than others. So they always find themselves in a position of oppressing others. In other words, putting others down. In other words, they try by all means to suppress others. When you try by all means to lift up your head, they are always there to suppress you, so that at the end of the day, you don't survive. So this is what we are going through right now. And we have to be very, very, very careful, because these things will affect us psychologically. That is why I always analyze things deep before I can say, let me celebrate, let me do this. I always think about what is the root, what is the source of this thing. As I made this example, that when you fight against your siblings, you will fight and fight and fight and disagree and criticize one another. But the day you realize that it is because, or is as a result of an outsider, it's because there's someone out there. It's because there's a neighbor out there, uncle out there, who's trying by all means to bring confusion amongst you. That day, you will stop fighting against your brothers. So that is why I'm like, we have to go to history. We have to know who we are. You have to know who you are. Because if you know who you are, you will start loving yourself. I'm not saying you have to tolerate everything. You have to tolerate things that are not good. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying you cannot undermine other people just because you feel like they are inferior. It's better to treat people equal. And I would understand if people would call everybody kwere kwere. If you don't understand their language, if you don't understand what they are saying, I would appreciate that. But now, if you exclude other people and then you think you can take advantage of other people. That's not that that's not a good thing. And again, even when it comes to this thing of like there are people who are taking our jobs and etc. Yes, it's a fact. It's a fact. But who is doing that? Who is doing that? In other words, there's someone who is like, here is the bone, fight against this bone. So the problem is not the person you are fighting for this bone with, but is the person who owns the bone. Is that person is the one that you have to deal with. That is why here in South Africa, the problem is the government. The problem is the private companies. Those people are the ones who are a problem, because they don't care about South Africans. Even though the laws are there, they don't care. So that is why we have to like put our frustration upon those people. So without any waste of time, I just want to say, love your neighbor as you love yourself. And whenever you disagree, make sure that you do so with respect.